Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend and are ready to receive today's blessings and healing for your heart, your soul, and your mind. Welcome to Held and Heard, a space where stories are embraced, voices are valued, and hearts feel at home. I am your host, Gabby Aguayo. If you didn't know me, nice to meet you. This podcast is supposed to be used as a tool to help us navigate life in a more open and optimistic mindset, understanding not only our feelings, but also others. So I'm very blessed and happy to have you guys here. I hope you learned something new today or at least live with a positive mindset. Today we will be continuing with our first series of 5 episodes. This series is called Personal Growth and Life Lessons. And today, finally, we will be following along with our second episode, which is called The Inner Child, how past experiences shaped us and how we heal. Like many, my parents weren't perfect. They didn't have the greatest relationship. Growing up, there was a lot of fights, physical and verbal abuse. Even though they tried to keep the relationship going for so many years, it was too broken to repair with bandages. They divorced when I was really young. That, to be completely honest with you guys, I don't even remember how old I was. If you had divorced parents, you might have experienced the overwhelming and stressful feeling of having to jump back and forth between them. And even the emotional relief that they were no longer together because you just didn't want to keep living in that unhealthy environment. They made so many mistakes out of anger, sadness, selfishness, frustration, and who knows what else they were going through. But that affected my sisters and I childhood. Don't get me wrong, we had beautiful moments and a lot of memories with them, but the bad ones were the ones that got engraved in my heart for a long time. Even if their intentions were malicious, they still mark our childhood. Each one of us was affected in one way or another. And I have learned that the past can't be changed, but it also doesn't define me. I am so happy that my parents got to find peace with each other, but I can't deny that I spent my whole childhood trying to be the perfect, responsible, easy to love child. I thought that being good meant being small, being agreeable, and never asking for too much. I silenced my own needs, pushing down my emotions to become who they needed instead of becoming who I truly needed to be for myself. And let me tell you that didn't end when I was a child, not even a teenager. It took me years to unlearn. I learned the love was conditional. As a good child, I only felt accepted when I was obedient and quiet, even if I knew they were wrong. I couldn't say much because the public humiliation was going to be even worse. That's how they felt in control, even when their lives were out of control. I became hyper aware of others' needs and I learned how to read the room and adjust myself to keep the peace. I feared disappointing others. Even in small mistakes, I felt like a failure. I carried the pressure of meeting expectations because of the fear of rejection. With friends, teachers, family members, and even strangers, apologizing for anything and everything. I'm sorry for what? I never understood why I had always been so apologetic of anything that I did, even if it wasn't wrong, even if it was something small, I was always apologizing. Feeling responsible for others' happiness, being the good child always meant being the fixer, the peacemaker, or the one who made everything easier for everyone else at my own expense. Carrying with adults' problems, always being in the middle of the chaos, parenting my own parents. That should never be a kid's job. I lost touch with my authentic self so many times. Constantly prioritizing how others saw me made it so harder for understand who I truly was. It continued like that for a couple of years back, and I have mentioned this several times, until I realized and took control of my life to help myself first and then help those who I love. Always accepting that the process will take time, because it did for me. But if they were not willing to let go and move forward in life, I was not obligated to stay for the ride. I always struggled with setting boundaries. It was so difficult for me, especially when it came to my older generations, because there's a belief that you need to stay quiet, you need to be respectful, you need to be obedient, and whatever they say and do, it's right. And you should never speak up, because then you're being disrespectful. And it makes it so difficult because obviously you don't want to be the evil in their story. You don't want to be the the black sheep of the family. Saying no or prioritizing myself felt so uncomfortable. I thought that being good meant being selfless. So advocating for myself made me feel guilty, even scared. If I didn't feel like hugging the person, accepting their invitation, going to the party, going on the trip, I had to find a way, even if it meant getting on debt, because saying no, it was so difficult. Or even if I ended up going another day with another person, having the need to constantly over explaining myself so they could understand me, even if I knew they didn't care about me and only their own needs. I used to struggle so much with expressing my emotions. That could be sadness, anger, frustration, or anything that was viewed negatively or I saw as bad behavior or a way to start conflict. So I always tried to push those feelings down until one day I would explode and people would see me as the villain of the story. The quiet and perfect child was not too good anymore. Now I was rude. Now I was disrespectful and they saw me as the bad person. When I stepped into my teenage years, that's when I started my YouTube channel. I created this avatar myself, but only with the good child characteristics, making people feel good, agreeing with them, and oppressing my feelings. Years passed before my eyes until one day I craved for change, growth, and most importantly, my power. But at that moment, I didn't know, I didn't understand, I couldn't comprehend or grasp my feelings and understand why I was feeling the way I was. I was scared, I was confused, and not for myself, mostly because of what other people was going to think about me. I didn't understand why certain things affected me so deeply, why criticism felt like rejection, or why I struggled to say no without the guilt consuming me. Then I realized that I was still carrying with wounds from the past, and it had shaped me into the person I was in that moment until I strived to change it, but not in the right way. It was more in a anger, frustrated way, not caring about other people or being mad at everyone for not understanding my unexpected change. I was constantly acting and responding with resentment. This was in my personal life with the people I interacted and also online, because if somebody will comment asking why to my change or I don't know, having so many questions, but not in a right way, I will lash out and I will comment back with a good comeback. And that made me realize that I wasn't at peace with myself. I was still holding onto resentment because they couldn't understand where I was coming from. Even if I had opened to them in several occasions, they just continue asking why, but we don't like it, like why. And at the moment, I couldn't comprehend where they were coming from until I realized that they were behind the screen. They don't know, they don't understand what's going on in my personal life because everything that I post is just limited. Not everything has to be on the internet. That's something I have learned over time. I used to post anything and everything, which I don't regret because it's already in the past. I already did it, but that gave people the illusion or the thought that they had the right to come into my life and decide or dictate or make comments that were not necessary. Or even then, I understand where they're coming from. They just have so many questions. And now that I'm at peace with myself and I have healed and grown and understood that not everybody's going to understand where I am coming from, or everybody has a different perspective of life and situations, I am now able to understand their hurt and their frustration as well, because they grew up with me and they felt some type of attachment, which I did as well, but I let go of so many things and it wasn't easy. People thought that it was so easy for me, but it wasn't. It took time. It took years. I am 27 and I started YouTube when I was 17 or 16, I believe. So yeah, I totally understand where everybody's coming from. But once again, I moved on. Some of them are still stuck in the past, which I cannot do nothing about it. Now I have a clean mind and a clean heart to respond with grace, love, and without attacking them or continuing the toxic cycle of negative comments. So, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I once had completely lost my kindness to a negative world. And don't get me wrong, this world, it's beautiful. It has beautiful things, beautiful experiences, but there's also negative, and that's something I can't change. The only thing that I have is the power of my mind and my heart to have a more optimistic mindset about any situation, even though it might not be the greatest. Have you ever reacted to something that felt bigger than the actual situation? Maybe you felt this too, like you're stuck in old patterns, reacting from a place of pain instead of presence. Now, that might be your inner child speaking. The experiences we had as children shaped how we see ourselves, our relationships, the world. Our childhood traumas may have something to do with our life choices. Healing means breaking patterns, finding peace, and stepping into our true selves, letting go what happened to us and welcoming where we're heading now. Remember that it's not about forgetting it, it's about making peace with what already happened. It took me years to understand and navigate how my childhood traumas had a profound impact in who I was. If you're totally confused on what the inner child even means, the inner child represents the part of us that still holds emotions, wounds, memories from our childhood. Here are some signs that your inner child needs healing. Okay, if you struggle with self-worth or people-pleasing. People-pleasing might seem like kindness, but in reality, it's a mechanism of survival. It's a learned behavior that keeps us safe, especially when someone's love feels conditional. You don't want to lose them, or at least that's what you think. But if your relationship with a certain individual feels like a heavy weight and absorbing completely your energy, it's probably because you haven't had those uncomfortable conversations with them to understand or know if they are even supposed to be part of your life. Next, we have a fear of abandonment and rejection. Constantly reading the room to avoid conflict. You become like a chameleon. You stay quiet to keep the peace and maintain a connection with those people you surround yourself with or those who you love. But that only drains you to the point that it makes you feel anxious and overwhelmed every single time you guys get together. Constantly walking on eggshells so they won't feel some type of way. Silence might have been your defense mechanism, especially in a household where conflict was a persistent reality. You probably believed that staying quiet ensured peace, but you failed to recognize that peace was only superficial, drowning yourself in your own thoughts and emotions. Next, we have repeating toxic relationship patterns. This could be with your partner, your friends, and even ourselves. That's how my life was. That's how my life continues to be. We're always unconsciously drawn to or repeating what feels familiar, even if it's painful. These patterns usually stem from unmet needs or the unresolved traumas from our past, especially childhood. You are subconsciously repeating or creating what already feels familiar because it feels right, even though it also feels wrong. And this could change. It just requires action. Once you recognize the pattern, choose a different response. This might mean setting boundaries, walking away from toxic situations, or consciously practicing new behaviors that will redirect your life to become a better you for you. These patterns weren't created overnight, and it will take time for you to break them, unlearn them, and heal from them. And that's okay as long as you take action. Be gentle to yourself as you unlearn old habits. Remember that you'll be crying and questioning yourself about your journey. And this might sound to the extreme, but just view it as a drug addict. Many of them seek for the help. And when they get it, they might be confused, sad, mad, and just wanting to go back to their old habits. Because healing, it's hard, it takes time, and it might feel wrong when you're in the dark. But once you're fully recovered, looking back, it makes all the tears, the frustration, the sadness, the anger, the confusion, it all makes it worth it. Now, this is a big one. Overreacting to certain triggers. If that's something you're struggling with, it's more likely that you have unprocessed traumas. Our triggers are often the key to uncover what needs healing within us. Instead of avoiding them, we should embrace and understand them so they can lead us to a profound growth and self-discovery. And of course, find a way to heal from them. And once that's accomplished, this will make any difficult conversation easy because now we are at peace with what happened and who we were, and it no longer defines us or affects us. If you would go back and talk to your younger self, what would you say? So I saw your guys' comment on the last episode, and one of them, it wasn't bad, but she was saying that I should let the podcast flow, right? But this is the reason why I don't do that. Because I be eating, I be processing my thoughts and my emotions. Because I don't want to just, you know, talk out of my butt cheeks And also because I want to make sure that you guys get what you need and not just filling the gaps with random words just so the podcast can be longer. This is the reason why I do a lot of cuts, because I want to actually help you guys with what I feel, believe, and think without distractions. So no more distractions. I took some notes because this is what I wanted to say to myself or my younger self. That I am sorry for everything you've gone through, that life can be tough sometimes and people can be evil. That the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. My Lord. That she's always been faithful, and that's why she will find her path through the darkness. That I see you, that I hear you, that I love you. I love you, Gabby. I know you can't see this anymore because we are in the present, but you're in the back of my head. I would never abandon you, and healing your inner child is painful. But it's also where you reclaim every piece of yourself that was lost. You deserved love and safety then, and you deserve it now. I asked this same question on Instagram, and there was a lot of responses, and I could connect with every single one of you. But one of them got stuck with me. She said, your parents' problems are not your problems. Focus on being a kid, which is so hard because you're there looking at them and trying to understand what's going on, why they don't know how to control their emotions, or why the words they choose had to be so aggressively and hurtful towards each other. I am the oldest of three, and I always felt like I needed to step up, step up my game. I didn't feel like my parents were mature enough, and I had to take care of my siblings. They took care of us, but not in the ways we needed, which was emotionally, and even parent my own parents, which was so draining. Always trying to mend peace between them so my sisters and I wouldn't have to deal with their problems. I always felt bad because I never intended to hurt their feelings or be against them. But sometimes their words or actions will put that guilt in us for not being on their side. Like if this was a sports team that we needed to choose a team from. Now, how our childhood experiences shaped us. How does that even have to do with who we are now? Let me tell you that it has to do a lot. We have unmet needs and core wounds. If we put that into our today's everyday life, even in our own relationships with our partners, most relationship problems come from unconsciously expecting them to heal old wounds or simply making a situation even bigger than it is because it triggers us. It takes us back to old wounds, old feelings, and old memories. And there will be so many situations where they will activate that pain in us. But ultimately, until we heal, we are going to have a good, healthy relationship with them. If not, that will cause relationship failure. If you're wondering why your relationships never last and you feel like the problem, it might not be you. It's just old wounds, old childhood traumas that is affecting your today's relationship with your partner or whoever you might have an interaction with. Your relationship becomes toxic, unhealthy, and unsafe. Now you're repeating the same mistakes, passing them along to your children, if there's any children involved. And now they will relive the same story that damaged you. And that will only create resentment. You see how the cycle goes and goes and goes and goes until someone decides to break it off? That's our timing. We are the ones who break cycles. We are the one who makes the change for a greater future. Not only for us, but also for those who we love. Honestly, I don't understand why being la tóxica or tóxico, it's so common or even a thing. Proverbs 18:21, James 3, Ephesians 4:29, all of these Bible verses talk about the power of the tongue, how the tongue has the power of life and death. The words we choose has a lasting impact in everyone's life. Okay, be careful what you speak to yourself, to your partner, your kids, and anyone else. You gotta use your words wisely because it can uplift or destroy someone, including yourself. The best relationship advice I can give you is to heal yourself, to have a positive and healthy relationship. Now, don't think that your relationship will be perfect. Of course not. Perfection does not exist in any relationship. Loving is recognizing that the other person has flaws, weaknesses, moments of doubt, just like you. Love is seeing beyond the arguments, the mistakes, and the misunderstandings. Understanding that they also have a past and they also need healing. You can't save them and they can't save you. But working together, taking accountability can save your relationship, especially if God is in the center. In 1 Corinthians 13, from the 4 all the way to the 8, you might have heard this if you got married or you've been to a wedding. And the thing here is that people just listens to it, but they don't apply it to the relationship. It says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoices at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. I know it can be hard at times because we are human and we are inside this flesh. But that's where we should take a step back until our emotions and thoughts are fully recovered. It's way better to hold on instead of saying what you thought was good or felt good in the moment when your feelings were out of control. Now, don't take it if I'm telling you to stay quiet or oppress your emotions. No, you should always say what you think and feel, but with a clean mind, with a clean heart. That will take you places. Behind every happy couple, there's the conversations that no one wants to have. The ones that expose insecurities, past pain, and unspoken expectations. Being in a healthy relationship means co-creating a space where honesty feels safe. We also have emotional neglect, feeling unseen, unheard, or dismissed. I believe that this is one of the reasons why a lot of us have had or are struggling with anxiety. Always doubting yourself or constantly over explaining yourself to people or even struggling to communicate your wants or needs because you feel like it's a burden to others. Then you find yourself minimizing your feelings, thinking that they don't matter until you find yourself building resentment towards others for not understanding you or seeing you. A lot of people who were emotionally neglected as children, they struggle with letting people inside their lives or even attaching to someone because they struggle to let people inside. They have trust issues. And when they do, something happens, something bad. But that's where I have said several times that our happiness shouldn't come from the hands of others, but happiness comes from within, meaning that it's okay to open up. But we do have to be aware and careful of who we let in. And if we do, we need to remind ourselves that we do not have to seek for validation or that our happiness and lives depends on them. We also have conditional love, believing that you have to earn love through achievements and behavior. Many of us have been in the position where our parents tell us to do something their way, and if we do, they will love us even more. And honestly, that's toxic parenting. But it's crazy because we have also been in the position where we believe someone had to earn our love. They need to prove themselves to be loved by us. And now then we see it okay. We find a justification to the why. But if we go back to the root cause of it, we will understand that it's our unhealthy side speaking. Remember that self-reflection is a must because we have also been toxic in someone else's lives, making their life miserable and challenging them, proving themselves that they're worth of our love. Once again, we are repeating the same cycle of conditional love. Next, we have abandonment or instability, feeling unsafe in relationships or fearing people will leave. Many kids that face childhood traumas are amazing at reading the nonverbal of others to keep themselves safe. And I don't mean this only physically, but emotionally. They become what others need to not worry about negative experiences because they don't know how to deal with them. This one is really common with a lot of us, including myself. Well, I used to struggle with it. Perfectionism and self-criticism. Growing up with high expectations or constant pressures, making you a person who's always trying to prove themselves and even in control of everything, not only your life, but also others. And we already have talked about the art of letting go of self and others, but we mentioned that we cannot control what's out of our hands. And this puts a toll in our minds because we don't know how to cope with stuff that it's out of our control. Self-criticism is often used to achieve a goal or to motivate ourselves, but it only prolongs the anxiety of not getting things right, and it starts to become a miserable experience, seeing the negative of everything, losing your optimistic mindset until you just want to quit, leading yourself into believing you are a failure. It's okay to help yourself grow and acknowledge what you're doing wrong in your life to become a better person, but not to the point of self-destruction. I have caught myself in so many situations where I allowed people to be imperfect because it's okay. But when it comes to me, it isn't. You gotta be kind to yourself and reminding yourself that you're also a person in your own life that you need to be checking up on. Give yourself the same kindness you give to others. Give your kids the same kindness you give to strangers. And give your partner the same kindness you once gave them when you were in the stages of getting to know each other. And be proud of the little things you have achieved day by day. A lot of parents give us that "we're not mad at you, we're just disappointed at you" talk. And that led a lot of us to be the perfect child. Or you couldn't stop feeling disappointed of yourself. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you're learning from them to become a better person. All of us struggle with evil, but giving in shouldn't be your first option. This is how these wounds had showed up and affected your adulthood. By feeling fear of failure, self-doubt, or being overly critical of yourself, having trouble setting boundaries or trusting others, seeking external validation rather than self-acceptance or improvement of self for yourself. Now we need to enter the healing process. So here it is: acknowledging and identifying what childhood memories are still affecting you today. You gotta reflect on past wounds without judgment. Reparenting yourself, which a lot of people struggle with or do not understand. But basically, you have to hold yourself accountable and take control of your life, your actions, and your choices. Because I understand our childhood marked us and lead us to who we are now. But now you have the option to keep your life going that same pattern or break cycles. Give yourself what you didn't receive as a child. Self-compassion. It's okay if you made mistakes. You're still worthy. Set boundaries to protect your peace. It doesn't matter who it is. If they really love you, they will understand. Here are some inner child exercises that I would love you to practice, even myself. If you want to share them on Instagram, you're more than welcome. The first one I have is writing a letter to yourself, offering comfort and reassurance. This one, it's more private, but you can stand in front of a mirror and speak to your younger self kindly. Also, reconnect with childhood joys. What made you happy when you were a child? This could be painting, drawing, singing, dancing, whatever the case might be. Whatever made you happy, bring it into your life. For me, it's creating. I love to create. I don't know if you have seen what I do, but I do anything and everything because I feel happy doing it. And it makes me feel productive. It makes me feel that I can do anything and everything because there's no limit for me. Even if society tells you that you are not doing it great or you're not perfect or whatever the case might be, who cares what they think? So what do? I incorporate it into my life. I tag my husband and my baby along, and we are living our best life. If it's traveling, if it's working, if it's painting, if it's building a furniture, whatever the case might be, anything that it's creating, it's beautiful, it's amazing, and I feel so worthy. And the biggest one for me, which is forgiveness and release. Not necessarily forgiving others, but freeing yourself from resentment and letting go of the idea that your past defines you. Now it's time for me to open up a little bit more. So I want to tell you guys a story. So one of the stories that I have with my divorced parents was that my mom asked my dad for the divorce, right? But he didn't want to give it to her because, I don't know, honestly, they never had a good relationship, so it didn't make sense. But the point is that my mom was a single mom of 3, and she did all of the work by herself, working, taking care of us, cooking, cleaning, everything, right? She basically did what she could with whatever she had in the moment. And of course, in the process, she made so many mistakes, but she was still a good mother. Overly strict, but overall, she was good. One time she wanted to go out because she was young, she was single, and she needed a break, which it was fine by me. So she took us to my grandma's house, aka her mother, and texted my dad that he needed to go pick us up because it was his turn to take care of us. And my dad resisted only because she was going out. So what did my mother do? She drove back to my grandma's house and took us to his mom's house, taking note that his mom didn't like us. Why? That's another story, a longer one, which I'm not gonna get into right now, but she didn't like us. So every single time we would go to her house, it was so uncomfortable, and honestly, it made me sick to my stomach. I felt overwhelmed and I just wanted to go back home. There was no time that I didn't cry every single time I was there. Obviously, I didn't let them see me, which it was even worse because I was suppressing my feelings, but it was bad. So we had to knock on her door, And once she opened, she looked at us with a dirty look while we were standing there with our bags. And there was no other option than just to sit in her perfect, lovely, clean, organized couches and wait until my dad came back home to pick us up. She went into her room and I could hear how she was complaining to my dad how my awful mother abandoned us at the footstep of her door. The feeling of being a burden and not wanted consumed me slowly. Everything I went through just so my mom could have a break from us, from me. Was I that terrible of a daughter? Was I too much to handle? Or was I in the way of them having the happy life they always wanted? There were so many thoughts, feelings, and questions I had until my dad arrived mad at the fact that my mom left us outside his mother's house, told us to get in the car to only drive around town for hours with the smell of alcohol and a 12-pack sitting in the passenger seat, listening to that music that triggers me up to this day. And people wonder why am I being such a fresa or making comments about why I'm not proud of my roots. Like if listening or dressing a certain way makes me more or less of my race. Hours and hours of reckless driving and making stops only to pee or to buy chips and sodas because that will keep us content. Thank God, growing up and being able to listen and understand what led them to make such decisions made me realize that they also have their past and unresolved childhood traumas. I'm not making an excuse for what they did, but I'm also not going to sacrifice them from what's been done. And don't get me wrong, there has been other situations where people get hurt physically by their own parents, which honestly it cannot get into my head. And I'm so sorry if you have gone through that. And remember, you gotta remember, the forgiveness doesn't mean reconnection. If you feel like you are not ready, it's okay. Take your time. If time never arrives, it's also okay. But just release the resentment and anger and sadness from inside you. It's going to be hard, really hard. But you got this. You got this for you, for yourself, and for your future. There's always space to grow and take accountability. They already paid and are still paying for what they have done. I understood that healing from my past and becoming who I am also helped them become who they are now. 2 Corinthians 1:3 all the way to 5, it says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles so we can comfort those in trouble with the comfort we received from God." We are all still growing and learning, each one in our own timing. I'm happy that I learned that the past is in the past and I can no longer change it. However, my present is what matters, and I am no longer the good child with bad habits. Healing your inner child is not about blaming the past. It's about giving yourself the love, the care, and the understanding. And remember, if they're not ready for change or letting go, release them with love. Not everybody's ready for change, and you should be okay with that. But you don't have to stay for the ride. Healing takes time, but every step counts. And I know it's hard to admit that what happened to you, it still hurts. But minimizing your problems does not protect you. It only silences the parts of you that need healing. Your pain is not too much. Your story, it's not insignificant. And your healing, it's not being selfish. Timing doesn't erase trauma. Healing doesn't mean forgetting about it. It's about facing what happened with compassion, letting go so it won't continue to damage yourself or your relationships. Matthew 9:35 all the way to 36, it says, "Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching his synagogue, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he was compassionate on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without shepherd." Many traumatic events in our childhood affected how we reacted as adults, making many mistakes, regretting what we did or say. But God takes our past and transforms it into a testimony of healing. If you're struggling with this, you are not alone. Healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning how to carry it differently. My butt cheeks are burning. But I'm so happy and blessed that I am able to once again bring you guys another episode. Thank you so much, Sweet Loves, for all the support and love that you have been giving to this channel. Honestly, I feel big things are coming for me, for you, for us. So thank you once again for staying on today's episode. And if you stayed all the way to the end, I hope and pray you learned something today, or at least leave with a positive mindset. God bless you, and I will see you guys until next Sunday. Love you, bye.